What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Doug Mo Knows. You're about to see a sit down I did yesterday with Amelia and Al. Al's a school teacher here and an avid environmentalist. Amelia's actually an environmental economist working for the UN in Africa. So these guys challenge me a lot on things I share online, get into a lot of heated debates. They've never tried to shut down my right to share my opinion though, so in the spirit of the channel, I wanted to have them on, give them a platform to talk about things they're passionate about. I was planning on doing two different interviews, but they both just happened to be dropping by at the same time. I'll be doing a part 2 with Amelia before she takes off back to Africa, so if there's anything we missed, anything you'd like me to ask her, drop it in the comments below. Apart from that, bear with us on the audio because I'm having some trouble with this thing. We'll probably just run with the GoPro audio for the whole video, but yeah, bear with us on that. Enjoy the chat. Thanks. Alright guys, welcome back to Doug Mo Knows. Today I'm joined by Amelia and Al. Amelia is an environmental economist with the UN working in Kenya, and Al is a school teacher, teaches high school in Cairns. Both these guys challenge me on a lot of my opinions online, and given the spirit of this channel is to promote free speech, neither of them have ever tried to shut me down. They challenge me, and I appreciate where they're coming from with that, so I wanted to give them a platform to talk a bit about what they do and what their beliefs are on a few topics. So Amelia, why don't you tell us about your job and what you're doing in Kenya?
So I'm an environmental economist. I'm working with the UN Environment Program in Kenya, and my job is basically about making nature's values more visible in policy.
Cool.
So through economic valuation and monetary valuation of nature.
Yep. So that's be no surprise to anyone. We've butted heads a lot on like some climate change and like environmental stuff. I think we can probably find some common ground here today though. And Al is also quite the environmentalist, but why don't you tell us a bit about what you're doing and the kids you're teaching up there?
Yeah. So I'm a high school teacher up in Cairns, and I don't know why I'm nervous. Cut. Yeah, so I'm a high school teacher in Cairns. I work at I work with the largest Indigenous population in a school in Australia, which is great. I'm humanities, HP, science trained, and also love nature. So I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about in regards with Doug. Yeah. So,
yeah.
Good.
Cool. So what? You touched on it a bit there, but what? Yeah, so you're working for the UN in Kenya. How long have you been doing it for?
2.5 years.
Yeah, and what the goals of the program that you're working for? Like,
essentially,
more broadly speaking.
Yeah, like the reason the headquarters of Environment Program is in Kenya is because a lot of the environmental issues that we're facing are to do with developing countries and like them really rapidly wanting to develop economically and industrialize and stuff, but we're losing so much nature really at high rates, and we're not really accounting for what we're losing fast enough. So that's sort of the main idea.
Yep.
And our main work is at the moment sort of trying to come up with complementary indicators as well as GDP, because GDP has been sort of our, like, we worship it.
Yeah.
But it's only one snapshot of our development. It's not all of the pictures.
Yeah. So that's a question I did want to ask, how you, I guess, reconcile the problem like with global warming and emissions and stuff with the developing world. And so that's, what they're trying to do, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what, do you want to touch on that? Like how...
I think a lot of people think that there's a trade-off always between environment and development.
Yep.
And that's been like a really big sticking point for the work that we do, because it's simply not true. It's a lot of the time really big corporations that are really big carbon emitters, like fossil fuel industries.
Yep.
Will make it seem like, oh, we need this for economic growth, we need coal, we need, natural gas, all this sort of stuff. And sometimes it is good that you can turn natural capital into income and like invest it in schools and health and stuff, but there's so many other ways and so many other industries and renewables and stuff that are just as profitable if you invest the same amount of money from the state into them.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So you hear a lot on renewable energy stuff that it's not maybe as environmentally friendly as what it's sort of played up to be. You probably know all those arguments. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of people would say, for example, like electric cars take batteries, and the immense amount of battery production is also an environmental harm.
Minerals and stuff.
Exactly, and a lot of those minerals needed are from like cobalt and stuff, and needed from like the middle of the Congo, which as an environmentalist is one of the most important areas in the world to preserve. So there's definitely trade-offs, and we like acknowledge that of different technologies, but it's more about like driving investment in future technologies that maybe we get beyond batteries, or maybe we get to a state where we don't need, you know, that type of mineral in that battery. So it's more about like a drive of like value of getting away from fossil fuels rather than what we have at the moment.
And what's your take on global warming? Like, how much time have we got? With
I think
fossil fuel, like
the transition.
there's a lot said about how long we've got to transition away from fossil fuels. What's your?
I think going around the UN at the moment is generally a 10-year bend the curve, I think is what they say.
Right.
To start getting on the track where we're not completely screwing ourselves over. But I mean, there's so many different models and projections. Anyone could tell you something different. There's the climate emergency people who are just like, we need to act now on everything. And there's other people saying like, any action is good action. So like, I don't know.
Where would you put yourself?
I don't know if I have a strong opinion on it. I'm all for just like, gosh, that's a hard one. Because it's, do you have anything to add?
Well, when they talk about climate change, are you just focusing on carbon, or are you also talking about like carbon that's produced by fossil fuels? Are you also looking at mass agriculture and then the gases that come from methane?
Yeah, exactly.
So
where we can maybe all find some common ground. So I'm still sort of on the fence as far as like carbon emissions and climate change, but on like environmental destruction and like destroying forests for agriculture or mining rare earth minerals or whatever. That's where I guess you've got the question: are you destroying the environment to try and save the climate? If you align with the climate emergency people and we just have to stop all CO2 emissions.
So if you destroy, so say it again, if you save the land, you'll save the climate, right?
No, well, there's some people that would say we're destroying the environment to save the climate.
Right, and that's to do with the mining for the
correct.
No, okay, I agree with that.
I think now it's being addressed, but there has been a problem with climate change and other environmental destruction and like ecosystem collapse. Everyone's on the same page. Usually the climate people are like environmentalists as well, but there's been some cases where there's been like competition of funding of, you know, is climate more important or is this more important? And now the whole UN, for example, has like changed their like framework where climate change is one planetary boundary of like 7 really important ones that are like, you know, nitrogen cycle and ocean currents and stuff. So it's not the only one. And if we can look for solutions that like address climate as well as things like deforestation, then we're on the right track. Because like to be in competition is really destructive.
And it's very broad and it's all interlinked as well. So the thing that's annoying about climate change is everyone just focuses on carbon. But if they're looking at the 7 different ones and looking at the nitrogen cycle and the ocean currents, then that's a better way to look at it than just focusing in on one thing, which is carbon, because then people just focus on fossil fuels or cars when it's such a bigger picture.
Al shared some stuff with me recently about like mass agriculture and the effect that's having on everyone else. Put their phones on silent like me. Mass agriculture and the effect that's having on the environment. Do you want to touch on that? And I guess want to get your opinion on it as well. Is there too many people in the world, what, you know.
It really depends on when you talk about mass agriculture, again, this is very broad, but if you wanted to look at cattle, for example, that's a broad topic, but just like just whittling it down, one, you need to feed cattle, and not all cattle can be grass-fed because there's not enough land. And if they had to go grass-fed, then you had to chop down the environment or chop down forests, whatever, to make the land for them to do that. So grass-fed cattle is unsustainable. But then you need to make grain-fed cattle, but you need the land to grow the grain, and then you need to then use heaps of pesticides, whatever. Then have their own issue, but then you need to use fertilizers, again their own issue, lots of water, and then you then feed that to the cattle. So that could have been fed to humans, but then you're feeding it to cattle to try and fatten them up. So then you're using a lot of resources to get.
And is there, I don't know, I'm not saying there isn't, but if everyone turned vegetarian overnight, would that solve anything? Like, are you getting a net gain if you used all that land to grow crops and then everyone just ate the crops rather than feeding it to farm animals?
Well, you'd be using your resources better.
Yeah, okay, well that's, I guess, so you'd be getting more calories to people.
Yeah, more
at the end
calories
of
per
it.
unit of land or whatever.
Yeah. You would?
But you'd be using the land better. Well, it depends. If you're looking for protein, you get more bang for your buck for a piece of meat of protein than you would for vegetables. You need to eat more vegetables to get as much protein. But then if you look, that's a health thing. But if you're looking at it environmentally,
I mean, I like eating steak. I'm probably not going to stop eating steak, but I'm looking at it from the point of view of like people who say we've got too many people in the world, or like how do we feed them all? So how do we use the land we've got to get like enough calories to people per say like acre of land to keep more people alive? You can do that better, like solve that problem if you did away with cows and pigs and everyone was vegetarian.
Jump in whenever you.
I was just gonna say maybe definitely with cattle. I'd say. Sometimes there's cases, especially in Australia, that you have land that just can't be cropped, and so can, like over around Stanthorpe, especially like with sheep and stuff. But a lot of the time, a lot of really good quality, like with the Amazon, much the Amazon is cut down for cattle ranching, which is probably the biggest tragedy really, because it's just you're losing so much value for a cattle ranch basically.
But then that's where the thing that is annoying is that everyone knows that there's issues, but no one wants to come together and really solve the issues. The reason why the Amazon's getting chopped down is because you have poor farmers that can't feed their family. So therefore they're going to chop that rainforest down, which we all need for oxygen on the earth. And then there could be things that you could use for medicine in there, or whatever, we don't even know because it's not being explored enough. And so anyway, these poor farmers are having to try and feed their families, so therefore they need to chop it down to make money. But I think the Amazon should sort of be like in Antarctica, where countries buy portions of it, but then they're buying Antarctica because if they're ever able to access that, then there could be resources under there. But if they bought
make it more of a public
thing where countries actually work together to protect that, or the farmers were educated in ecotourism or something, which people
is the deforestation of the Amazon, is that actually mostly for cattle ranching, not growing sugarcane and that sort of stuff?
I've only the articles that I've read and stuff, you pretty much only hear about cattle ranching.
Brazil is a large sugar industry as well.
Yeah, because I know they've got big like biofuel industry in Brazil that they're growing a lot of. They need a lot of farmland to fuel that, so they've obviously done that to diversify away from petroleum, but then that's created another.
They also use it for logging as well.
Illegal logging. Or just bad bad governance.
Where like in Australia, say like because the Amazon, probably comes down to the mismanagement by the governments, allowing that to happen. Like, what would you say the state of things are here, like with laws around like farming, land clearing, and
With land clearing, I know you have the phenomenon of panic clearing, which
Yeah.
is like the government changes so often and people are so uncertain what the land clearing laws are going to be that when it is a good time for them and when the land clearing laws are less strict,
Yeah.
they will just clear like everything that they can, even just in anticipation of there being a
Yeah.
constraint.
Yeah.
And it's usually land they don't even need to clear. It's just like this
Yeah.
psychological phenomenon.
Yeah.
So I know that's a thing.
And you look this up, the Queensland is one of the largest deforestation places in the world.
In the world.
And it's that developing country as well.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
In terms of area, it's one of the
Yeah.
worst. Yeah.
and we're a developed country, we know, there's an issue, we're educated.
Yeah.
But
Still the
we're still-
incentives there to
still
clear
doing it.
land.
Yeah. Yeah. What's it going to? Where's it going from that?
Well, we're jumping a lot in between. Did we answer the question about the cattle? And
Yeah,
whether or
I
not
think
we
so.
did we answer
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
About feeding the world and stuff.
Yeah. What?
Well, just if you want to jump back on agriculture,
Yeah.
maybe we could use see, it all comes back to countries competing with each other as well and not sharing resources, and resources could be food as well.
Yeah.
And maybe we need to move more towards like vertical gardens or
Yeah.
vertical farms,
Urban farming.
urban farming,
Yeah.
Yep.
and use space, even in the cities and urban areas, more appropriately.
Yeah. Because
Um,
there seems to be it's a bit of a paradox. Like when anyone says to me, "There's too many people in the world and like we can't feed everyone," I think just from like a dumb person looking in on it, like we've got a problem with like getting the food to where it needs to be, because half the world's obese, and then more than half the world's starving. So I don't think we've reached the point where there's too many people on the earth to sustain them, but we're not doing a very good job of it. I'll
Distributing
give you
stuff.
that.
I think yeah, you're right in that
Is,
some
I
people have
just-
too much, but
Also, just wanted to like make the point on like industrial farming and stuff. Like a lot of people will jump up and down and say, but like GMO crops, like fertilizers, like industrializing farming, that's given us the ability to grow the lift a lot of people out of famine and grow the population to where it is. So, is it necessarily a bad thing, or is it just time that we like move forward from that, or what's?
I think it's time. Well, like you're saying, it's enabled us to grow our population, but is that a good end in itself, or is that just like residual from evolution where the species just wants to grow?
Yeah.
I think we've got to the stage where rationally we know we've probably hit our carrying capacity, but we still do stuff to like procreate and like make our footprint on the planet the biggest it can be, which is just anti-intuitive really when we see how much destruction we're making and like how much we're all on top of each other.
What? How do you fix that? Like because the developing world is still got like the fastest growing population.
Yeah, definitely. And culturally, like the tribes north of Nairobi in Kenya, it's like you want as many daughters as you can to sort of marry them off and get cows, and as many sons as you can to have your name. So like there's every incentive to have a big family.
Yeah.
And so like there's a lot of places like that, especially in rural Africa. So it's not just a case of simply saying have less kids or
does
it comes back to education.
Does the like child mortality rate in like those parts of the world play into that? Like people are having more kids because there's a chance they'll die younger and they want their name to.
Do you think? I don't think that's a driving factor.
I don't think it's one of the biggest now. I think definitely when you learn about demographic transition and stuff, that will be a factor. But now these days, in the tribes I was talking about, you can still have 8 kids or want to still have 8 kids because of the other reasons, not because you're losing them.
And they're
to
expecting,
disease.
they're having 8 kids, expecting 8 kids to live.
They also, it's access to education, access to sexual health.
Yeah.
And if they don't have access to contraception,
Yep.
or if it's culturally a negative thing.
Yep.
Because if a woman has an armbar, she's on the pill, or any form of contraception, then she's doing the wrong thing by the country or
by the community.
by
and
the
stuff.
community,
Yep.
Yeah.
and she's shamed,
Yep.
then that's a bad thing. So
Yep.
there needs to be a move away from, maybe it's like the woman's position in the society as well.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
their role, what is it?
I was just going to say, like, do you think, so no, Kenya, is quite developed, like one of the
For
richest
Africa,
countries in Africa,
Yeah.
hey? Yeah. Do you think part of it's just like developing different industries and giving these people, different job, like, so you don't have to have 4 daughters to
Yeah.
grow your herd of cows?
So you're saying like industrialization and sort of
And
the less
just modernisation, I suppose,
Modernisation.
like, so if
Yeah,
they
and
get
also
like a,
not
they
every-
don't have to be a coal miner, like if they
Different
get an
capital.
office job or something that
Yeah.
support their family rather than, herding cows. And do you think that
Yeah.
overall is
also
that
thing as
improving
Definitely.
things like in Kenya? I know that like
Is
IT.
it improving like burden on environment? Because
Yeah.
definitely not.
No.
I think that the amount of industrialization and like unplanned development,
Yep.
where things are just cropping up here and there without proper like planning governance.
Yep.
Especially because Kenya, even though it's quite developed, has a good GDP, distribution is really bad. So it's like
Sure.
nearly as unequal as South Africa.
Is government corruption?
Like it's like the 4th corrupt in the world. It's really bad. Like at all levels, like I'd have to bribe someone to give me my own parcel at a post office after an hour of negotiating. Like it's every level of governance is corrupt in Kenya, and that
Wow.
makes a massive boundary to what you're able to do, like development wise.
Because you're there working for the UN in concert with the
Yeah.
government.
And then the colonial history plays in too, because not every country in Africa has colonial history, and
Yeah.
so that I'd have to read up more
Was-
on the history.
Was Kenya?
English.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like one African country that wasn't colonised.
There's a few, I think. Ethiopia wasn't.
That's what I'm thinking of. But yeah. Anyway, that's off topic. But what? Because there's an interesting correlation between like how corrupt the government is, and I would argue like how well that country does environmentally, and definitely like with distribution of wealth. Like people talk a lot about how bad it is in the Western world, but just to what you were speaking on, then it's obviously a whole another level there.
Is it corrupt in that it comes down to family or tribal based, so you're looking after your own?
Yeah, a little bit in the sense that whatever tribe the president's from originally, they'll sort of look after their own tribes in the sense of allocating funds to the provinces that their tribes want, So there's like an overlap of democracy and state sort of stuff, and then tribal lands.
Yeah.
But it's further than that. I think even just aid money, like trying to keep a track of where aid money goes within the government, like the ministers take a cream crop off the top and then hand it out. Like it's really quite distressing actually. Like the potential is much higher than what's being realised, definitely.
Is it done that they just give aid money without giving it for a sole purpose of here's the money to build this road?
Yeah.
So there's
No
they don't have
accountability.
no accountability or
It's just
Sometimes, not all the time. I think people have, especially people based in Kenya or NGOs or whatever, know that you stream it through a certain organisation that you trust or a certain whatever like program. But if it's just given to a country and like said do whatever with this, it can be a bit more like that's probably not the best.
Yeah. What role does like colonialism and so all these countries that we've got in Africa that were essentially drawn on a map by European powers, and then all like the tribes within them,
That's a
how much
tricky
of a
one.
mess does that create? Because you hear like all different things, but you've been there.
Don't want to talk too much on it because I'm not very well versed, but I know that like if you're in a taxi, a lot of the taxi drivers now are Kikuyu tribe, for example, and they're really proud of the fact that when colonialism came, they were like, we jumped on it, we jumped at the opportunity. They kind of like immersed themselves in modernization, right? They didn't resist it.
Yep.
Conceptually. And they're like, and then you see the lures on the street, like they didn't take colonialism, like they're the poor ones, blah, blah, blah. And they're quite proud of the fact that they've like capitalized on colonialism.
Yeah, right.
But then you hear it from someone else's point of view, from a different tribe, and they're like, the Kikuyu have like sold themselves and sold their culture and like, you know, just playing to the money now. And so there's such a mixed, even that's within Kenya. So I don't know about the rest of the continent, but there's many mixed.
Just with, so maybe not so much Kenya, but a lot of the civil wars you see in Africa, like, is that because Europeans have come in and said, right, this is a country now, and then like once they can't afford to hold on to the colonies, they're going, oh, like now you're on your own, and it's like a country with 3 different tribes and half of one, you know, tribal lands over the border in another country.
Maybe.
If they had the opportunity to make their own land boundaries, it would look different.
That's about it on that. I had something else I wanted to ask you.
Can we jump back onto agriculture?
Go on.
So I can't remember what you said, but it's something like, how could we do things better?
Yeah.
We brushed over it.
Yeah.
So I think, well, we've done, so the Green Revolution came after World War II. So using pesticides, chemical warfare to create pesticides, and then you spoke about creating abundance of food because then they had pesticides then, so they were able to kill the pests and they were able to make more produce. So that's where we've sort of gone to, and you're wanting to make as much produce as you can so that you can make as much money as you can.
Yep.
So therefore you have some farms in Australia that are bigger than countries, you know, it's massive, so that you can have, well, you know, obviously try and make as much money as you can. But if you continue to do the same things, and we found, I mean, we only have 60, they say we only have 60 years left of fertile soil because we continue to do the wrong thing by the land.
Yeah.
And like, for example,
this is with nitrogen cycle.
Well, there's a nitrogen cycle as well, but
Just
even
an
carbon.
imbalance of carbon in the soils and stripping the soils of topsoil
and microbiomes, and just if you continue to turn the soil over, then you destroy the microbiome underneath the soil.
Yep.
And also, if you keep turning it, then 1, you release carbon back into the atmosphere, and 2, you also lose water and moisture in the soil, which then makes it, well, causes erosion, then you have runoff of topsoil, and then, you know, then it becomes less nutrient, and so therefore you get less nutrients in your food, and then it flows on into us.
So we've got 60 years left of fertile soil. You were talking about vertical gardens and more like urban agriculture before. Let's carry on. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine. You can jump in whenever.
I was just going to say, just before you start, because I'll forget, that Melbourne's doing a really cool project. I remember reading about on vertical gardens, where it's like a private-public partnership.
Right.
Where I think land developers or like you know, owners of apartment blocks can get a grant or whatever for setting up a sort of vertical garden, rooftop garden for food.
Yeah, right.
And I don't know how it works with like distributing the food or whatever, but like there is like initiatives starting that's trying to bring in the private sector with that sort of thing, not just the government, you know, planting vertical gardens everywhere. It's like a two-piece thing. So.
No. So just looking at changing the way we do things.
Yeah.
And I think that's happening. Using that example. And so if you read the book Dark Emu, which looks back at the way Aboriginal people did agriculture, the soil here was much different to what it is now. Yeah. And very like spongy, even the way they what's it called when you plow. Even the way they plowed the land was different. They did it diagonally instead of like horizontally, whatever, to stop erosion. But the British used European farming techniques to Australia and have destroyed the soil. But not learning from Aboriginal people, which is a different topic. Like we can go on about that forever.
That's a different interview.
what's both your opinion on like GMO crops?
You go.
It would be interesting. Well,
I'm more interested in your opinion on it.
Not against it.
Yep.
But I think it should be an open discourse where you shouldn't be chastised for wanting to be skeptical about the effects of it, you know, because I think a lot of the time a technology comes along and if you're sort of against it in any way or a little bit even skeptical or a bit like, oh, I wonder if that could damage our health or something, you're sort of just shut down. You're like, you're a conservative. You're like
conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, you're a conspiracy theorist. And I think that's quite unhealthy because there are things that we don't know and we haven't had the time to experiment what the effects are. The same with 5G.
Yeah.
It makes sense with GMOs where you have drought resistant crops
Crop breeding for
in developing countries where, you know, well, climate change is they're getting less rain or whatever. You're trying to come up with a solution. If you don't come up with a solution, then we're not going to get food.
Exactly.
Because we're not distributing the resources properly.
That's the argument for, like, you see a lot of arguments against them. But the argument for them is, well, like if we can increase crop yields or make crops more drought resistant in Africa or whatever, then
if it could be a bit more like public good, like sort of if it's too privatized, like with Monsanto, then
some stuff I've seen with Monsanto where they're, you know, these crops, like they've got patents on like certain seeds, for example. So you go and grow a crop and then the farmer like can only harvest that and sell it. Then they have to go back to them for their seeds, like because those the seeds that the crop's yielding's infertile. You can't. Like that's sort of scary if you follow that down the rabbit hole where they then control the only supply of fertile seed going forward. Like that's
fairly scary.
So I think we all agree that the privatisation of GMO is wrong, but
the monopolisation of it's wrong.
Like anything.
But if GMO used for good,
done right, and with good intentions of the public good, rather than just one company trying to make heaps of profit, like obviously that's not going to result in a public good. Like it's going to result in profit. So
that was that. So I'm just trying to like sort of wrap this up. We've sort of touched on everything. So I wanted to get your opinion on GMO crops. Also, what like with the coronavirus and like people working from home and just what sort of happened this year, there's a lot of people sort of questioning whether like living in big cities and stuff is the way to go. What's both your take on that? Like, would we be better off on the whole, like now that everyone around the world is getting better access to the internet and things like that? Would we be better off spreading people out more where they can have a backyard and like a veggie garden and you don't have a big city of 10 million people that's dependent on industrial farming to provide all their food?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because at the moment, especially in Australia, most of us do have already the backyards to grow our own food. So I don't know, because if you have bigger blocks, obviously you're encroaching on natural habitat a lot more and we don't have much of that left. So in terms of like urban sprawl, I'd kind of be like a bit quite against that. And you still need the infrastructure, the roads and stuff to get those people from outside the city into a city. Do
you not think we're moving towards a place where people don't have to, people can work from home more, they can live further away, work from home, and you don't necessarily have to have all the cars on the road, like people commuting 2 hours to a job where they sit in an office and do a job where they could be doing it from home?
I think it's quite exciting that we've had this dress rehearsal where we've realised it can work. I just think a balance is really important. So for example, like over in Nairobi, my team is basically my boss and I, so when he's on mission overseas, it doesn't matter really if I'm in the office if I don't have a meeting. So I'll sort of do my week three days in, 2 days at home. And the balance I think is super important because you get the social aspect of being at work, and you're sort of like in the vibe and
Yep.
belong to a group.
Yep.
But it's not the everyday like, oh, I've got to wake up to my alarm again, and it's like the same shit
Yeah.
every day.
Mm-hmm.
So balance, I think, is important.
Yeah,
But-
I guess the point of the question is what's like more sustainable. Like a lot of smaller cities or towns, or because we're saying like the world as a whole seem to be moving towards a trend of everyone moving to big cities.
Yeah.
What's more sustainable? Like, is that sustainable having
Sustainable for what?
for everything, well, for the
Resources in
environment,
general.
like resource management?
It just
Like, if you
depends.
got-
We haven't figured out the best sustainability practices of either rural or city development. So it's
Yeah.
like really hard to say because a city technically has the efficiency potential
Yep.
of not using too many resources and sharing resources and having those things like libraries and public transport to move a whole lot of people at once.
Yeah.
But we're not capitalizing on that potential at all. So it's
Yeah,
really
everyone
hard
still,
to say.
still wants their own car. And
Yeah, and then you have
Yeah.
cities that like Nairobi where half the people are in slums. So
Yeah.
no, that's not efficient at all.
Yeah.
And miserable. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Al?
I agree. I don't think we found a balance. On a social aspect, I just saw recently on the news that people are looking at moving out into country towns, wanting to move out of cities. And then reviving those country towns is a great thing. And,
Yep.
and then creating jobs in rural, remote communities.
Yeah.
And starting industry there.
Yep.
I think that's a positive.
Yep.
Communities, people are more social, you're a part of something.
Yeah.
So in that aspect, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, that's I just like from personal experience living in like a big city, I find it's more like antisocial than
You're very like you can be a bit lonely and isolated.
lonely.
Paradoxically.
Yeah. And I just think if you especially like in Australia, a lot of, and I don't know, maybe agree on this, but a lot of like the rural towns in Australia have been raped and pillaged by the resource sector, and it's all good when it's good, and then they, the coal runs out or the gas runs out or whatever, and they pack up and go, take all the jobs with them, and then everyone in the towns like learn to become dependent on that, and there's no one's setting up, an IT business in Roma or like a factory out there, like, building, like making shoes or whatever. Like everyone in rural Australia pretty much work in mining, or get their income from mining, and then when that dries up, like the town's dead. Like, so everything that's happening, like, and with better internet infrastructure and stuff, like maybe could see a reversal of that. Might be a good thing. So that's that. GMO crops, big city living. Just recap, what's both your opinion on CO2 emissions? Is it the end of the world? How much time we got left?
I'll just say really quick, I think it shouldn't be just climate change. Climate change is just one aspect of it. Basically, if we like improve our ecosystems, through like planting better trees and mangrove protection and like soil carbon sequestration and just sustainably doing things better, we can avert the climate crisis and also like avert other pending crises like the nitrogen cycle and everything. So taking a more like environmental systems approach rather than politicizing this climate thing, I think would be much more helpful.
Cool answer.
I agree, 100%. It's very popularized and people jump on a bandwagon of climate change and they're not doing their own research about it. They make it very emotive and people. So they jump on that. But if you look after the environment will look after you, and it's not clear cut carbon. It's so broad that you need to be looking over an array of areas.
Good answer. Nuclear energy, like as a stopgap. Where does that fit in? What are your thoughts?
I think if it's the technology's there, and I think in a stable, like tectonically stable environment, like the middle of Australia or whatever, it could work. Getting that energy out to where it's needed is different. So I'm not against it, but I think in terms of like what you were saying about the battery like the resources needed to make renewable energy. Just like coal went through its like, you have, you know, crappy, very high emitting coal, and then you get better technology and get, you know, clean coal or whatever.
Yeah.
It's the same with battery. Like any technology, any renewable energy is going to go through that phase too, where you make it more environmentally sound. So I think if we gave it the room to incubate and grow and like technologically advance, then it could, you know, don't completely dismiss it. But nuclear, I'm not against it. I think it's an important sort of stepping stone towards the transition.
I think it's got its own problems, but
definitely,
I think for one, it's pretty hypocritical of Australia. Like, we're geologically quite stable, and we mine uranium and sell it to other countries to use in nuclear reactors, but we ban it and say not in our backyard. And then I just think like the people that are, you know, saying that CO2 emissions that's like going to kill us in 10 years or whatever, but they're also against nuclear energy. Like, if you changed over all the coal plants to nuclear plants, then they've got no CO2. Yes, they've got other problems, but that's why I like you guys to actually like entertain both sides of the argument and look at things.
I don't think it's a utopian. I don't think we should have every.
No. You know the type of people I'm talking about.
That
are like
contradictory.
No coal, no nuclear. Like, basically, that's like we're just.
It's interesting. There's only been like 3 or 4 bad nuclear problems, or what am I trying to say? Bad nuclear disasters in history. Yeah. And yes, they're bad. But that technology was very old. And they've got 21st century nuclear reactors now that has less human interaction with it. And if the electricity is cut off, then they shut down. And they're not going to explode. And TerraPower, which is Bill Gates' like side company, they have created these nuclear power plants that run off old nuclear waste, which then gets rid of that. So they've
you got like 4th and 5th generation reactors that use the waste from
previous.
Like I didn't
realize that. That's quite cool.
And so the issue of nuclear waste isn't there anymore. And so if you have
less so, you end up with
not as much as it was. So people can't be jumping on that and saying, oh, you're going to have all of this nuclear waste, because that's not the case anymore when you have the new 5th generation nuclear power plants. So, and we are high consuming, and we as a country, we have high consumption of energy. Maybe we're not going to get as much energy from solar and wind that is as reliable. If we're wanting the same standard of energy usage, then maybe we need to be looking at these nuclear options. Yeah,
that's the thing with like the argument for it is all your renewable, the renewables are getting better with like batteries for like what Tesla's done in South Australia, but obviously the batteries have got their own problems like we've been over. But the argument would be like when the sun's not out and the wind's not blowing, then you need coal or gas or something for your baseload electricity. That's where I think you've got to have the conversation about nuclear, because it can provide stable baseload energy, and if you can, you know, scale down the output when the wind's blowing or whatever, that's great. But I think we need to have a conversation about it at least as a stopgap.
It's the diversification.
I was just about to say that, that matters, rather than being reliant on one thing. I don't think we want to see a world where every single energy source is nuclear, because that is frankly terrifying. But diversification. You know, you're making use of everything that we have.
And being smart with architecture as well. And making it available with solar panels over car parks at shopping centres.
Right, exactly. You know.
It's like big spaces that could be used, should be used.
What's I don't know, we don't have to get into it, but like what's like the solar panel, like is it mostly silicon? Like, are they environmentally friendly to produce, or?
It takes a lot of energy to produce one, doesn't it?
I don't,
And I just know about the lithium batteries with the cobalt, and that's mainly in Congo, but I don't know anything other than that.
Yeah, I know the batteries. I'm just not sure, because we're putting up a lot of solar farms and obviously a lot of rooftop solar and stuff in Australia. I just would be interested in what the environmental footprint.
Thing that you were talking about, Doug, where, and I'm going to say this wrong again, but you said to destroy the land, you protect the climate, right? That's what you said.
To protect the climate, we're destroying the environment.
Okay, right, same. This is to protect the climate, we're destroying the environment. So to create these solar farms, you then need to do deforestation to then have or the area to put these solar farms on, and then that creates issues for that ecosystem there, and then heats up the air around it as well.
Like there's always trade-offs, and I think we finally like getting out of this idea where one thing is the best solution, because it's not, everything has trade-offs, every single thing, and like you just have to weigh them up pretty like carefully.
Like I just think like with the developing world and that, like, it's a bit rich where I'm not accusing you of this, you're obviously there trying to like make it all work. There's people sit back and go like, we need to like stop using fossil fuels, and they're living in Melbourne or whatever, and they're sort of right up here
detached from reality.
In terms of first world to the third world, like they're living in one of the best like first world cities, and they go, well, no, now we can stop, but we got the chance to get there by burning fossil fuels, burning coal, like.
But that's because we didn't have the technology before. I think if countries can leapfrog technology and take the best renewable technology, and we actually assist them with that rather than just like throw coal down China's throat like we've been doing, when we can give them a lot more, or like India as well, like Bangladesh, whatever, whoever we export to, that's, it's pretty hypocritical of us to be like, everyone needs to stop using coal, and then our biggest exporters. And it's also like hindering their sustainable development. It's giving them GDP for now, sure. But it's not good in the long term.
Well, that's it's hypocritical. Like I said, so we go, we're gonna build more solar farms and wind down coal power, but we still dig a shitload out of it. Still dig a shitload of it out of the ground and send it to anyone who wants to buy it. And the same, like that's my point on nuclear. Like we've got a ban on nuclear power plants here, but we'll still dig uranium out of the ground and sell it to other countries to do the same thing. But I think we touched on it before, and that's interesting take on it. If we can leapfrog that, I just wouldn't want to sit here like in first world and say no, like those countries, like they haven't got the right to use fossil fuels, like if that's how they want to do it, to industrialise. Like I feel hypocritical saying that. If there's another way we can help them leapfrog that technology and catch up to where we're at, but not if it's like at the expense of the education and like medical systems advancing like to where we are, because a lot of that sort of comes on the back of energy availability. Fair to say, no?
Yeah, it is fair to say, but it's also like, as you said, helping them realise their sustainability potential. Rather than, like, I think a lot of the time we're quick to jump to, let them do it how they want to do it, which, taking it like we did, using the coal until it's all used up, until they've degraded all those landscapes, until they've burnt all the coal.
Country, India and China, 3
but
billion people
there's
between them,
and
if they bring all of those people to our standard of living doing it the same way we did, then we probably are fucked. But
there's other ways to development, that's the thing. I think we forget, like, coal did grow Australia's economy fine, but it's not a necessary truth. It's just how it happened. It doesn't mean every country is going to be better off doing it how we did. And you just got to think outside the box a bit. Like, we're facing so many, like, environmental emergencies right now, really, with, like agriculture and climate and everything. We've just got to think a bit differently and not just hide back in our, that's okay, they can just do it how we did it because that's hypocritical. Like, we're past, the rhetoric. Like, we need to actually...
We are in this together, so therefore we have the ability to help them, so therefore we should be helping them. And in saying that, going off your other point, China and India are putting heaps of money into their renewable industries. And
they've recognised that.
They
want to
educated,
develop that.
they're putting quite a lot of money into nuclear power as well.
I'm not too sure. China?
Yeah.
China had a deal with America in that TerraPower space, where they were going to develop these 21st century nuclear power plants as a tester and put them all throughout China. But then through this tariff economic war with America, then they weren't allowed to have access to American technology.
Nuclear.
So therefore it's not happening anymore.
Yeah.
So they are looking at making these TerraPower nuclear reactors in America, but it's not going to be on the scale it was in China.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, that would pretty much cover it all. I think it's really cool. Like all of your answers to most of that, like it's pretty like positive. Like you're environmentalist and all the work you're doing and stuff, but you're not telling me like that the world's going to end, and you got like a lot of positive answers to those questions, and yeah, I think that's really cool. So thanks for coming on, and Al.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, is there anything else you want to say in closing?
Great conversation.
No. Yeah,
thank
cool.
you.
All right, thanks guys.
Nice.
Thanks. Alright guys, that's that. Thanks for hanging around to the end. Again, sorry about the audio. And that was supposed to be 2 different interviews, so it was a little bit unorganised. I thought it was still a good chat though. We'll be doing that part 2 with Amelia, so if you've got any questions specific to her line of work, drop them in the comments below and I'll ask them in part 2, and hopefully I'll have that planned out a little bit better. Sorry it's taken me a little while to get this edited and put it up. We had some people say some full names. I went off on a 20-minute rant about gun rights, which had nothing to do with why I had these guys on, so I just chopped that whole thing out. Anyway, part 2 will be coming up. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, subscribe to the channel, get the bell on, like this video. Till next time, stay safe. Cheers.